Well, hey guys, it's Krista Watson here from Krista Quilts, and today I have 3 fun free motion designs I'm excited to share with you, all based on the basic swirl design. These are embellished swirls, packed swirls, and a really fun one that I like to call elongated swirls. All 3 of these designs can be found in my book, 99 Machine Quilting Designs. I highly recommend you grab a copy so you can follow along. So what I'm going to do in just a moment is I'm going to sketch out each of the designs on my iPad. You can follow along with a loose leaf paper, a sketch pad, whatever you have, and then I'm going to stitch out each on a practice sample so you can really see how to form these designs. At the end, I'm going to wrap it up with a couple bonus tips on how you can apply these to a real quilt. So let's get started with all the fun. Let's start with embellished swirls and packed swirls, which are designs number 69 and 70. Then I'll show you a fun variation called elongated swirls, which is design number 71. So to stitch out embellished swirls, first we're going to start off with the basic swirl shape, which starts with a C or backwards C. Then we're going to create what looks like a cinnamon roll looking design, again either forwards or backwards, and when I stitch it, it doesn't matter which way I do. Now I need to add a little echo, so I go inside my cinnamon roll, I echo back out, and then finally I need to take that design and make it continuous by doing one swirl and then going and doing a second swirl. That's the basic idea. Now let me put it all together and show you how I would fill in an area with this fun design, with this fun embellished swirls. So I'm going to start off with the little tail, do my C, do my cinnamon roll, stop, come back out, echo out, and that's my first shape. Then I'm going to go in and do another one. These can be big or small, but the important thing is to fill in all the spaces. And when I get to little odd areas, I'm going to add little embellishments like little echoes, little divots, and then I'm going to fill in with some more swirls, maybe big swirls or small swirls. Again, the important idea is to fill in all the spaces, and I'm not worrying about how big they are. Again, I'm going to echo around wherever I need to and start a new swirl. I'll go ahead and fill in all the area because this is what it would be like if I was actually stitching a quilt. The fun thing about this is it's perfectly imperfect, it's lots of texture, and the important thing is just remember when you're actually stitching, I would quilt it with a blending thread rather than contrasting like you see here. Now let me show you what it looks like when free motion quilting embellished swirls. So my feed dogs are dropped, which means I can stitch in any direction. The tricky part is keeping my stitches as smooth and even as possible. You can use a stitch regulator to help with this, but I actually learned to quilt without one, so I usually don't use it. I'm quilting my C shapes and my cinnamon rolls, then echoing back out just like I practiced when drawing. The tails help me connect the swirls to one another to form a continuous design, and the little echoes and embellishments help fill in all the gaps in the design. I'm quilting swirls just like I drew them out, but notice how my quilting looks different from what I just drew. The drawing helps me get an idea for how the design will flow, but quilting it on a practice sample helps me get comfortable with moving in any direction to fill in all the spaces. Now I'm stitching with a darker contrasting thread on my samples so you can see what I'm doing, but when quilting this on a real quilt, I would prefer to use a lighter thread that blends in with my fabrics. When stitching on a practice sample, I'm mimicking how I would free motion quilt this motif from edge to edge, just like I would do on a real quilt. The only difference is that I would have more bulk to deal with. I usually start on the right-hand side of my quilt or my sample, then meander my way around the sample in every direction. I'm only going to quilt about half the sample with this design, and then I'll save the other half for another design, which I'll show you in just a minute or so. To sketch out a packed swirl, I'm going to start with the basic swirl design, and I'm going to echo my way back out, but then I want to start the other one very close together. So I might touch a previous line, re-stitch on top of a line, and do another swirl. When I get to the next swirl, I'm going to touch a previous line and then go again. I'm going to continue doing that. When I have room, sometimes I'm going to touch a previous line, backtrack on top of the previous line, and echo back around it. I might do it once or twice, stitch on top of a previous line and keep going. And this is what is going to get these swirls looking like they're nestling underneath each other, on top of each other, and it fills in all the spaces without any gaps in between. Now, sometimes as I draw these out, these are going to be really messy because this is just my hand-drawn look. But when I'm actually stitching this on a quilt, my stitching looks a lot better than my drawing, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. Again, I'm going to fill in all the spaces, and I might need to come back and add some extra little echoes wherever I need to. I can go off the quilt, and then I can come back and then I can draw another one to continue with the design. Sometimes I might stitch off the sample or just add continuous lines wherever I need to. The important thing you'll hear me say over and over is that it's more important to fill in all the spaces than to stitch a perfect design. So let me just go ahead and fill in all these gaps. And this really works well depending on whether or not you're filling in a small space or a large space on your quilt. The nice thing about this design is it's very flexible and it's scalable, which means you can make small swirls, large swirls, and again, because this is free motion, you can just kind of go around, fill in all the gaps until you're happy with how it looks. Now I'll fill in the other half of the sample with my packed swirls. So on a real quilt, I would actually start stitching on the right-hand side of the quilt and then meander my way over to the center of the quilt, quilting about half of it so far. Then I would rotate the quilt so that everything I've already quilted is now to my left. Then I would go back and pick up in the center of the quilt where I left off, and then continue quilting from the middle back over to the right edge of the quilt. So this is my basic technique for quilting an edge-to-edge motif on my quilt, no matter what the motif or design looks like. Now, whenever I'm starting to feel like I'm reaching or it's getting uncomfortable, I'm going to stop stitching with the needle in the down position, and then I'm going to move my hands to get a more comfortable position. The less I have to stretch and reach, the better my stitches are going to look. Whenever you stop and then start stitching again, try to anticipate the movement of your needle and your foot to get a smoother stitch. You'll notice in these samples a couple times where I like start stitching and then I stop and the foot moves a little bit. That is me anticipating how the design is going to go and where my foot's going to go. The open toe of my free motion foot also allows me to really see what I'm doing so that I can see where I need to move to next. Now, you may or may not have this capability. The important part is you want a free motion foot, but that open toe is like the extra bonus. For these pack swirls, I'm bumping right up next to a previous one and then backtracking or stitching on top of a previous line of stitching to make them nestle into each other. So I can quilt this design at any scale. I can quilt them large or small. I can smush them together to fill in any weird gaps or spaces. It can get a little bit messy, especially with this high contrast thread, but what I'm going for is texture over perfection. I'm also quilting all the way to the edge of my sample, again, to mimic what it would look like when I'm actually quilting a real quilt. So try not to get the edges stuck under the foot as you're stitching around them, and you can use your hands and fingers to kind of smooth everything out and keep that area flat that you are quilting so it's all nice and smooth. But please be careful. You do not want to get your fingers close to the needle, and you want to keep them away from the needle for safety. We do not want any accidents here. Once I'm comfortable quilting this design, then I'm ready to take it to a real quilt. And just remember, you're not quilting an entire quilt all at one time. As I'm stitching on my practice sample, I'm only focusing on one area at a time in between my hands. And roughly you can think that each practice sample represents about one block on your quilt. So just focus on one area at a time, and you can time yourself on each block to see how long it takes to quilt. Then you can take that to the entire quilt to get a rough idea of how long it's going to take you. Here's what embellished swirls and pack swirls look like on the same sample. They're very interchangeable and can be combined together. For elongated swirls, I'm going to start with a long tail. Then I'm going to do a swirl that looks like a little head or a party streamer. And I'm going to go back to the tail section, touch it, echo, and then touch the tail. Let me draw that out for you again so you can see. Elongated tail, a little part of the head, go to the middle, echo back out, go back to the tail, and then echo as many times as you want to. That's the basic swirl shape. Now to make that continuous, I'm just going to keep continuing that pattern. I've got the little swirl, I have the tail, go back, tuck it under, and keep going. Now, whenever I want to, I start with another swirl. I'm not worrying if these are going in any specific direction. The important part is I'm just filling in all the spaces and echoing, and then starting with another elongated tail, do the little head, go back to part of the tail, tuck under, and then go around. The trickiest thing about this design is filling in the odd spaces with little tails and heads and fun little swirls. Add more sweeping lines wherever you need to, and sometimes I will just keep going if I'm not really sure what I'm doing. You can also throw in some of the other swirl designs, like a basic swirl or a pack swirl, just to fill in all the spaces. Or again, you can go in and you can echo some of the lines to keep going. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, but once you add in all this texture, it looks really good. Let's see, I'm going to add another one right up here. This one's a little bit tricky, but it's very elegant, and it can look like plumes of clouds, maybe some little flowers. The important part is to not overthink it. So I'm just going to sit here and fill in all the spaces, and you can watch me draw and then try this on your own. Adding in some more little echoes, some more swirls, and I'm really happy with how this is looking. When in doubt, add more lines, add more quilting, and you can't go wrong. Now I will quilt my elongated swirls. These are similar to what I've shown you with a couple of differences. It's a more elegant design, but it's a little tricky to figure out how to fill in all the gaps. So basically, I'm using my hands as a hoop, and I'm keeping the area in between my hands nice and smooth as I quilt. That's going to make it a lot easier, especially when I'm dealing with the big bulk of a big quilt. So for this design, I'm going to often stop, look at the swirl I've just stitched, and then decide whether or not I want to go in one direction or the other one to form the next swirl. So really the key to this design is quilting the long, smoothly curving tails and then tucking them in to other swirls to keep the design going. Just remember, your stitching is going to look different than mine, and it's all going to look great. You can echo the design as much as you want, and then you can branch off and stitch new swirls whenever you feel like it. So get comfortable quilting swirls in any direction, switching back and forth between swirls facing in one direction or another. Just remember, there's really no right or wrong way to do it, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Just go with the flow when stitching this design. You're going to hear me say this a million times. It's all about the texture rather than the individual motifs. And when in doubt, add more quilting. So when I'm quilting my swirls, they tend to start off a little bit smaller, and then they kind of grow larger as I move my way around the quilt. So I'm always reminding myself to quilt them lots of different sizes, lots of different scales, so I build those imperfections into my designs. Whenever I have any weird spaces, I'm just going to fill that in with more swirls or more tails or even some funky echoed lines. Now, depending on what batting you use, that can also affect the look of your quilting. I like to use a natural fiber batting that's going to cling to the quilt. So like a cotton batting is going to hide my imperfections, or a wool batting is going to give me a little bit of extra stitch definition. But the fun part is trying out different samples and seeing what you like. Just remember, meander your way all around the area and don't stress too much if you need to squeeze in more of the design or if you end up stitching on top of a previous line of stitching. Just remember, practice makes progress. Here's my finished sample of elongated swirls. Yours may look different depending on your quilting penmanship. Now let me tell you a little bit more about this quilt behind me called Terrace Tiles. I love this design so much, I've actually made 6 different versions of this quilt, each quilted with a different quilting plan. The pattern itself comes in multiple sizes, so you can really customize it to make it your own. For this version, I quilted an edge-to-edge free motion swirl design with variegated thread. The fun thing about using the variegated thread is that it blends into the fabrics, and in some of the areas where it looks more solid, it's going to really stand out. So it's a great way to practice. Speaking of practice, take a look at this other quilt that I've made called Party Time. I also quilted it edge to edge with swirls, but on this one, it's a little harder to see the swirls. They blend in a little bit more because the fabrics are so busy. So here's my next tip. When you want your quilting to blend in, use busy, colorful fabrics like I like to do. So make sure you take a look at the description box of this video for links to everything I talked about, where you can get the books, patterns, even similar fabrics that I've designed myself, and make sure you check out every single episode and practice your free motion quilting skills. I can't wait to see you in the next one.